1, 2. Like this. Okay.
Navigation resumed. In 200 meters, turn right. In 200 meters, turn right.
Welcome to my welcome to my life.
In 200 meters, turn right. Turn right. Keep right. Keep right. Then, turn right. You have arrived. Navigation resumed.
Want to go? Mic test, control. Okay. Oh shit.
Keep left. Then turn left.
know that's the machine.
This programming is sponsored by West Chase District, serving businesses with office options, regional connectivity, amenity investments, and talent pool access within a
inches, the largest ever recorded in Texas. The major concern for hail is its widespread property damage. In 2025, Texas led the nation in recorded hail events with stones 1 inch or larger at 902. The financial impact is huge. State Farm alone paid more than $1.4 billion in Texas hail claims in 2025, the highest total of any state. Nationally, it's estimated that hail causes $10 billion in insured losses annually before accounting for agricultural losses. Kiana Holliman is a State Farm representative.
Hail is a major issue, and it's not just hitting Texas, it's a national concern.
Hail is a strange hazard because it's highly localized. One neighborhood can be hammered, while another just a few miles away gets only rain. Cameron Nixon, a research scientist with Oklahoma University and the Storm Prediction Center, says when it comes to hail, there is a lot that is unknown.
Yeah, hail is, compared to tornadoes, very understudied.
But we do know how hail is made.
So it's a form of frozen precipitation that really requires a really intense updraft to hold aloft.
To make hail, weather does say kind of judgment that up in the sky is a band of freezing air and a strong updraft that's keeping the chunks of ice from falling, and that's where it grows larger and larger until it comes crashing down.
And it's a process that occurs regardless of the temperature. A lot of folks are really surprised when you have a 90-degree day and you get ice falling from the sky.
But is hail getting bigger? A 2024 study in the journal NPJ Climate and Atmospheric Science titled Hailstone Size Dichotomy in a Warming Climate found that losses from hail and other severe convection storms in the U.S. have quintupled since 2008. And the authors say global warming is making hail larger because a warmer, moisture atmosphere can also create stronger storm updrafts, which help the bigger hailstones grow larger before they fall. How big could a hailstone get? Is there a limit?
I don't think we have a handle on that upper limit or like how often those giant hailstones actually fall.
In the U.S., the record for the largest hailstone fell in Vivian, South Dakota, July 23, 2010. It measured 8 inches in diameter, about the size of a soccer ball. I'm David Martin Davies in San Antonio.
The immigration crackdown across the country has some folks hesitant to call law enforcement for help. Now one Texas city has changed the way police interact with ICE after Governor Greg Abbott threatened to pull millions of dollars in grant funding. We'll take a look at where things stand now. That's coming up next on the Texas Standard.
Support for Texas Standard comes from HEB and the My HEB app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at HEB.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner.
Just about 10:19 at News 88.7. Good morning, I'm Tom Carter. Let's check on the weather forecast. Here's an update from ABC.
The stormy start to your Wednesday. Temperature-wise, highs warm will be anywhere in the upper 70s to low 80s, forecasting a high today in Houston of 81. We'll be watching another storm complex throughout the thunderstorms as early as Thursday morning. Storm chances up to 70% for tomorrow. I'm ABC 13 meteorologist Alita Laresca for News 88.7.
Navigation resumed.
Can't get enough PBS programming? PBS Passport is an added member benefit that offers exclusive streaming access to many of your favorite programs on the PBS app. Whether you're an NPR listener, a PBS watcher, or both, your ongoing donations of at least $5 per month qualify for PBS Passport. Make your gift now to start watching at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. For the past year and a half, emergency officials in many Texas cities have voiced concerns that some residents who need to call 911 might be reluctant to do so out of fear that, depending on the situation, local police might get immigration enforcement involved. Luz Moreno-Lozano of KUT News reports that in Austin, city leaders still can't agree whether all residents there can feel safe calling 911.
Depending on who you ask, the Austin Police Department either made a major or a minor change last month when it comes to how to handle encounters with people who might be undocumented. The new rules say that an officer or supervisor should, when operationally feasible, contact U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement if they come across someone with what's called an administrative warrant. That's basically a document indicating the person might have committed an immigration violation, not a crime. So does that mean police have to call ICE? Austin City Council member Chief Bella doesn't think so.
Right. Should is not shall, not must call. It's not will call.
He says Austin police are short-staffed, and they should be prioritizing local matters like violent crimes, property crimes, and patrolling.
Given that we're 300 officers short, I do not see how it will be operationally feasible for our patrol officers to take time out of their patrol and communicate with ICE when they have an administrative warrant.
The rules used to be different. They used to say Austin police may contact ICE and they had to clear it with a supervisor. But when Governor Greg Abbott threatened to pull millions of dollars in state grants, the city revised its rules again to say should. Michael Bullock, president of the Austin Police Labor Union, says it won't change how officers work. So he says people should feel safe calling 911.
Administrative, immigration things, if you're the victim of a crime, is not what we're focused on. And if we're focused on the criminal, that's what we're focused on.
But critics say there is no way to know for sure, and the Austin Police Department did not respond to multiple requests for comments. Even among the Austin City Council, there's disagreement. Council member Mike Siegel thinks the rules say that officers should call ICE.
Under the amended general orders, Austin police will call ICE more frequently, which will result in more members of our community being detained and deported, and at the same time, drawing officers away from solving real public safety concerns like active 911 calls.
Take what happened back in January when an Austin woman from Honduras called police for a domestic disturbance. She and her 5-year-old daughter, who is a U.S. citizen, were both deported. The incident sparked outrage, and during a February public hearing, people called for the city to do more to protect people from ICE enforcement. Austin Police Chief Lisa Davis was heckled at the meeting.
There is a rule of law that I have to follow as the chief of police here in the state of Texas. What we can't do is create policies that assist with that. So it is quite clear that we
Could something like that happen again? It's still unclear. City council members are looking for other ways to put up guardrails that protect people who are undocumented. Like last month, they adopted a resolution to create a working group on the issue. Daniela Silva with the advocacy group Workers Defense Action Fund says it's a start.
I think that this resolution is a really great first step in working to kind of rebuild that trust and communicate to Austinites that our institutions that are there to protect people really want to be able to do that.
But it will likely take months, if not longer, for that to result in real change. I'm Luz Moreno-Lozano in Austin.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. It's been almost 4 years since a gunman walked into Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, leaving 19 students and 2 teachers dead. KERA's Priscilla Rice reports that amid the hurt and the search for answers, something unexpected happened when an Uvalde woman lost relatives in that tragedy. Met a North Texas artist who had come to town offering to help.
Before the spring of 2022, Fort Worth-born artist Juan Velasquez had never stepped foot in Uvalde.
I didn't even know it was there or even heard anything about it. I remember looking around thinking like, man, like, I'm not even sure I'm ever gonna come back here. Like, I don't like it's tiny.
But after hearing about the tragedy, he gathered a group of artists and went to paint a mural in honor of 10-year-old Alicia Ramirez, one of the student victims who loved art. He didn't expect the mural to change his life.
I saw a few of his paintings, and then I didn't know he was the artist yet until I went on his page, and I saw that he did the mural of Alicia, and, you know, I followed him.
That's April Velasquez, Juan's wife. The two followed each other on TikTok for a year before a chance meeting right across the street from the mural. The meeting almost didn't happen. When Juan was in Uvalde painting the mural, April had traveled up north for a seasonal job.
1 year later, I decided I'm not gonna migrate anymore. I'm gonna settle me and the kids in Uvalde, no more, you know, back and forth, and then, you know, we met. So,
which is crazy because like I remember asking her like, hey, you know, what did you go to that school? And she did.
She spent most of her life in Uvalde. It's her hometown where her extended family lives. She describes it as a beautiful place.
The rivers, you know, Pontiac, and all the surrounding areas that make Uvalde feel like home. You know, everybody knows that everybody. You can go to a gas station, you can go to a grocery store, anywhere.
After their chance meeting, Juan and April went on a formal date and were inseparable after that, driving and flying back and forth. Both say they can't really explain what it was exactly that attracted them to one another.
I mean, you know, I think sometimes people make connections with people, you know, because if you think about it, it doesn't really make sense. You know, I live in a huge city. There's plenty of people in the DFW. And I remember telling her, like, we're gonna get married. And she laughed about it then, you know, but we did end up getting married.
It was never a blind conversation. It was never just, you know, what are you doing or what's your favorite color? It was never anything like that. It was just more deeply like, you know, how, like, more deeper than just smaller. It wasn't just small conversations.
Juan and April have been married for a year and now have a toddler daughter. They're raising their blended family in San Antonio.
We're opposites, but complementary opposites. We want to give our kids a good life, you know, like I have kids, you know, she has kids, and then we have kids together. So we have like 6 kids in total. It's a lot of kids.
April says her connection to Juan is helping her heal from the tragedy. Her cousin's children were killed in the shooting. She says Uvalde is still very much hurting 4 years later.
It's still a very heavy feeling around this time, and I see it all the time with my cousins that are posting that they miss their children, and it's a very hard thing that I couldn't imagine going through.
Juan and April want their story to be one of hope.
Finding like something good out of everything, which is, you know, where I'm at right now.
And Juan, once a stranger to rural South Texas, says Uvalde is now his community too. I'm Priscilla Rice in Dallas.
You can find a photo of Juan and April and one of the mural Juan painted for Alicia Ramirez on our website, texasstandard.org. That's also where you can find daily rundowns of our program. And shortly after the show ends each day, you can listen to full audio from the program there. We aim to make it easy to keep up with Texas Standard. That's also why we're available across podcast platforms, and we're posting full episodes on YouTube. Of course, we're also keeping up with our social media game. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky, among others. Meanwhile, there's more Texas Standard just ahead, including what's the deal with an upcoming El Nino weather pattern.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Good Spread, an Austin-based mineral sunscreen brand seeking to make clean, reef-safe SPF for everybody under the sun. Now at HEB stores across Texas or at goodspreadsuncare.com.
You're listening to News 88.7.
When a loan claims no interest, is it a good deal or just good marketing?
Welcome to Bauer Business Focus. I am Dr. Vanessa Patrick, Associate Dean for Research at the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston.
And I'm Bauer College Assistant Professor of Marketing, Bowen Luo.
meteorologist Cameron Self says for now, flooding concerns are low.
Right now, the way that the soils are, they can still handle a lot. But with each day, as things get wetter and wetter, of course, the soil conditions are going to become more vulnerable to potential flooding.
The rain is welcome relief in Corpus Christi, where the ongoing water emergency has been pushed back by a few months. The city was expected to declare a level 1 water emergency and impose water restrictions in September. Thanks to the rain, though, filling local reservoirs, that projection has been changed to December. Public safety during the FIFA World Cup could cost Dallas County more than its cut of $50 million in federal funding that North Texas will share. Our Marina Trejan Martinez reports that officials are bracing for a possible 7-figure budget hit.
The county is exploring ways to bridge public safety and overtime pay without wrecking the annual budget. Dallas County will likely get a fraction of what the region was granted. Commissioner John Welly Price says that the county's $6 million set aside for unexpected costs might be needed to cover extra law enforcement, security, and overtime during a public safety threat, including severe weather.
Something tells me we're going to dam into those expenses. They're going to be left to work. They're going to be entitled.
The first match in North Texas is June 14th. Marina Trejan Martinez in Dallas.
Health officials in Houston are keeping an eye on a new strain of Ebola virus hitting Congo. Dr. Catherine Troisi, an infectious disease epidemiologist at UT Houston School of Public Health, spoke to Houston Matters about her concerns.
We don't know a whole lot about this strain that is causing the disease now, the Bundibugyo strain of Ebola virus. This is only the third outbreak with this strain, but it doesn't appear that there are differences in terms of transmission.
The outbreak in Congo is of special interest in Houston because of the upcoming World Cup. Congo is playing a match at NRG Stadium on June 17th, and the team is also setting up a base camp in Houston. The San Antonio Spurs are looking to clinch another victory on the road against the Oklahoma City Thunder tonight. The Spurs lead that series after a double overtime victory in Game 1 on Monday. Tip-off is set for 7:30 p.m. tonight in Oklahoma City. I'm Matt Harrell in the Texas Newsroom.
You're listening to statewide news from public radio stations across Texas. This coverage is only possible because of support from listeners like you. You can help sustain and grow Texas news coverage by donating to your local public radio station today.
Is the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. Looks like a wet end to the spring across much of Texas. Several days of rain in the forecast for many listeners. Could this be the beginning of something much bigger? Yeah, we've been hearing warnings of what's known as an El Nino, a global weather phenomenon caused by an accumulation of warm water and winds in the Pacific heading our direction. But what exactly will those effects entail? Here to tell us more, Joel Lisenby. He is a meteorologist who studies drought in the southern plains for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, better known to most of us as NOAA. Joel, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you, David. I'm glad to be here.
I want to understand what the event means for everyday folks. Does it mean a lot more rain? Does it mean it's going to be a lot warmer? What does it mean as a practical matter?
Every El Nino manifests itself a little bit differently, but when we look on average at all of the El Nino events we've seen, we usually see a cooler and wetter winter across Texas. And that usually starts towards the middle part or the late part of fall, and it usually continues into early spring. So we're looking at this coming winter and into early next year.
Yeah.
We are expecting cooler and wetter conditions, but that's the average, and not every El Nino has behaved that way, and it's not a guarantee.
We're more likely to have, when we say wetter, we mean rain, or are we talking about with it also being colder, snow and frozen precipitation?
Sure, that's a great question. It's usually a mix of both. We're not expecting any more or less snow compared to rain. We're just expecting overall an increase in precipitation.
One of the reasons that I'm really curious about what sort of precipitation this El Nino event might bring, as you're well aware, Texas has been in drought conditions for quite a while, and a large portion of the state is affected. And I know that in some places which are desperate for water, they've been hanging a lot of hopes on some of this precipitation alleviating those drought conditions.
to look at a few areas of Texas, we're looking at almost 6 years of drought.
Yeah.
Other parts of Texas, maybe not quite as long, but everywhere in Texas has been impacted by drought, at least over the last year at some point or another. A few good storms doesn't mean we're going to see the drought disappear immediately. We still need some time to refill reservoirs. We're going to need some time for the stream flow and rivers to rise up. And we're going to need some time for parts of the landscape, especially out west, to recover from such a long dry period. Also, not all of Texas is going to be getting this rain at the same time. Our longer range forecasts are still keeping some fairly dry conditions in the west part of the state. If you're dependent on surface water, it's going to take more than just a few good storms or a few good months of rain to refill your reservoirs. And in some parts of the state, it's going to take even more than one really good winter to refill some reservoirs because the water is so low right now. But we still have a hot, dry summer to get through ahead of us before the typical El Nino impacts start. Looking at past years, at this summer before an El Nino begins, or even the summers when an El Nino has started early, it's not very clear. There's a pretty big mix of conditions. Some summers have been wet, some summers have been dry. The only place where we see a fairly consistent pattern is along the Gulf Coast, where we know usually, but not always, an El Nino pattern means fewer tropical storms forming in the Gulf, but that hasn't always been a guarantee, so it's a little bit messy. And if you're looking for your drought to improve, remember we still have a hot, dry summer ahead of us.
Yeah.
But long range, yes, this El Nino should make some big improvements to our long-term drought in the state.
Do I understand you correctly, though? You were talking about the coastal region here in Texas. And of course, quite often there's a concern come around June, July, concern about an increase in the number of and intensity of hurricane events. Does the El Nino suggest, the development of El Nino of this size suggests that perhaps we don't need to be as concerned about the development of a number of hurricane events in the Gulf?
That's a great question. On a very general scale, we know that El Niños usually mean fewer tropical storms and hurricanes. The official seasonal outlook from the National Hurricane Center is coming out on Thursday of this week. So I don't have those numbers in front of me yet. I don't know how many storms they're going to be predicting. But regardless of whether you have fewer than normal or above normal number of storms, it really only takes one storm. All it takes is one. Absolutely. And fewer doesn't mean none.
Right. Joel Lisenby is Regional Drought Information Coordinator for NOAA. And Joel, thanks again for taking time to talk with us on the Texas Standard.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, David.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the online UT, offering a full-time diploma program for remote asynchronous learners throughout Texas. More at highschool.utexas.edu/tuition-free.
You're listening to News 88.7.
I'm Ernie Manous. Hello Houston is headed to Galveston.
And I'm Houston Public Media's Galveston Bureau reporter, Juliana Washburn. I will be co-hosting with Ernie for a live broadcast from the Bryan Museum.
And we'll be joined by Galveston luminaries, from the former mayor Fred Brown to Will Wright from the Galveston Historical Society and even the Bryan Museum curator Eric Broussard.
It's Hello Houston, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. live from Galveston later today on News 88.7.
veterans, they have a sense of purpose when they're working with these animals.
Zamora says the healing goes both ways. Incarcerated trainers have reported learning patience and good habits through their work with the dogs.
We really are teaching people to modify behavior and reaction.
Brendan Gemmel is an Austin Animal Center trainer who leads weekly classes at the Travis unit. He was blown away by how quickly the group made it through the 12-week course he had planned, which allowed them to move on to more advanced skills.
The hardest thing we worked on was nothing. These dogs, when they get adopted, they will be a torches top or somebody's backyard. I'm just going to sit there and be calm.
Over the 12 weeks, Chico started to come out of his shell. He's still nervous around strangers and flinches at sudden movements, and he never did get comfortable with my microphone.
Oh, sorry. You moved too fast with my hand. That's a dog that's been hit, huh? Yeah.
But he began to play with other dogs in a fenced field next to the door. His tail curls up to show off his husky side when he's interested in something, and he tolerates a bath, though he's still not a fan. Prusky says it's been gratifying to watch Chico open up.
He's a complete goofball. He likes to have fun, run around. He'll jump and, just chase a ball and things like that.
Chico started learning tricks beyond the basic obedience of sit and down. By week 11, he was working on rollover.
He loves treats and almost does anything for a treat.
May 1st was graduation, and the day dawned humid and bittersweet as the incarcerated trainers prepared to say goodbye to their pups. The group was honored in a ceremony in the visiting room.
Number 1 is Mr. Theo, Big Head Theo, with Island Daniel and Mark.
Some of the dogs went to foster homes after graduation. Several were adopted. The rest are still available and waiting for their forever homes. Austin Animal Center's Julie Thatcher says she hopes they don't have to wait long.
They need good homes. And they're ready. They're all trained. They're ready.
Meanwhile, trainer Brendan Gemmel is already preparing for the next group of dogs to show up at the prison. This time, he says, the incarcerated trainers will take turns leading the classes each week. Some in the group are interested in pursuing careers in dog training or grooming.
They're all going to be responsible for their day's training, and they'll train each other.
them today. 40 Griffin.
I didn't know how to do the pony. I didn't know how to wear a miniskirt. I didn't know I could sling my bass so low. I didn't know that I could have a band. My name is Margaret Cho, and I am a comedian. Beauty and the Beat just made me feel like I was alive, and that I was a girl, and that I could do anything, even though I was a girl.
When I'm preaching or being told all these things I can't do, I felt like the Go-Go's were telling me and showing me all these things I could do. And I probably never would have started to play music or write or do anything if it hadn't been for Beauty and the Beat.
It made me able to visualize what a woman in charge of her art could look like, what a woman could do in music, not having to undercut their beauty or undercut their sexuality or power. They could just be and serve in all these capacities, and I really studied that. And I think that's one of the things that makes me a feminist, is being a lifelong fan of
The thought that the Go-Go's did for people what Susie Quattro did for me, that's been a source of great joy and pride for me.
We broke the glass ceiling. I mean, I get in a lot of arguments over this. There's literally no other all-female band that went to #1 on the charts, played their own instruments, and wrote their own songs. There's literally never been anyone else, and after all these years. So it's just astounding. I mean, we were just these teenage kids having fun.
I wasn't sitting there making the record thinking, this is groundbreaking. It was more, this is just what was happening in our lives, and we were at the right place at the right time with this creative energy just engulfing us.
When you think about 1978, forming the band and not knowing how to do anything, and by 1982 having the #1 album in America, it was just fate that we all came into each other's lives.
The Go-Go's debut album, Beauty and the Beat, has just been added to the National Recording Registry at the Library of Congress. We heard from bandmates Belinda Carlisle, Charlotte Caffey, Jane Whelan, Kathy Valentine, and drummer Gina Schock, plus author Lisa Whittington-Hill and comedian Margaret Cho. The Sounds of America is produced by Jenny Coltato of Accompany Studios. Today's 1A producers were Michelle Harvin and Alexandra Botti. This program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. I'm Todd Zwillick. We'll talk again soon. Jen's back tomorrow. This is 1A.
You have a life.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from United States Postal Service, dedicated to putting reliability at the core of USPS Ground Advantage to help businesses operate smoothly. More at usps.com/ground advantage. And from Ooma, a cloud-based phone service with AI features dedicated to helping growing businesses connect to customers and coworkers from anywhere. At ooma.com/NPR. This is NPR.
After 99 years on the air, CBS Radio delivers its final broadcast this Friday. CBS is closing its radio division as a cost-saving measure. From the 1930s to the 60s, CBS reporters like Edward R. Murrow became household names. How CBS Radio became a blueprint for modern journalism. That's next time on 1A.
On the next Fresh Air, how can a politician lie to the electorate and not face legal consequences? Even a lie as consequential as President Trump's claim that he won the 2020 election? In a new book, Andrew Weissman explains how we got here and suggests ways to hold politicians accountable. Weissman was the lead prosecutor in the Mueller investigation. Join us.
Join us this afternoon at 3 and tonight at 9.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by Ninth Funeral and Cremation, providing sensible, respectful cremation and memorial service options for over 85 years. Ninth Funeral and Cremation, 918-742-5556 or NINDE.com.
Public Radio 89.5, KWGS HD1, Tulsa.
Welcome to Outside Source with me, James Reynolds, live from the floor of the BBC's newsroom in central London. Journalists in BBC newsrooms have been filing stories on tensions between the US and Cuba since 1959, New Year's Day, when Fidel Castro and his younger brother Raul took power in Cuba, in what was to be the Cuban Revolution, communist-sponsored. For several years, the fate of the entire world seemed to depend in the Cold War on events on the Caribbean island. Now, the fate of Raul Castro himself, at 94, the last major survivor of the Cuban Revolution, is at stake. In the last hour, we've seen news on the Reuters news agency that Raul Castro has been indicted in the United States, according to an unnamed senior Trump administration official. We will cross live to Havana, the Cuban capital, to speak to our correspondent Will Grant to fill us in on exactly what is going on.
America's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, has offered a new relationship with the Cuban people in a video message marking the anniversary of Cuba's independence. Speaking in Spanish, he blamed the island's hardships on its communist leadership, not the US fuel blockade.
The
reason you are forced to survive 22 hours a day without electricity is not due to any oil blockade by the US. The real reason you don't have electricity, fuel or food is because those who control your country have plundered billions of dollars, but nothing's been used to help the people.
The US Justice Department has unveiled criminal charges against Cuba's veteran leader Raul Castro, increasing the pressure on the leadership.
Exiles returned to the island to defeat the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista in 1959. He's on the very, very ground floor of the Cuban Revolution. But I think among ordinary people there will be a lot in which Marco Rubio says that rings true to them. The idea that their island is failing, that is a result of mismanagement by the government, that they aren't able to run profitable businesses and able to breathe economically in ways they'd like.
Will Grant with that report. A video posted by Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, in which he taunts detained international activists from a Gaza aid flotilla, has sparked a global outcry. One who shouts "Free Palestine" is grabbed by the head and shoved to the ground. Canada, the Netherlands and France have all summoned their respective Israeli ambassadors. Turkey said the video showed the violent and barbaric mentality of the Israeli government. Yolande Nell is in Jerusalem.
Waving a large Israeli flag, Itamar Ben-Gvir tells them in Hebrew, "Welcome to Israel, we are the masters." The activists who were detained in international waters are also shown on the deck of a ship as the Israeli national anthem is played. The Italian Prime Minister called the video unacceptable and said demonstrators, including many Italian citizens, were being treated in a way that violates human dignity.
Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy says it's allowed 26 vessels to transit the Strait of Hormuz in the past 24 hours. It said oil tankers and other commercial vessels made the passage in coordination and with security provided by the Navy. A South Korean and 2 Chinese tankers are among the ships passing through in recent hours. Hundreds of ships have been stranded by Iran's blockade of the vital waterway since late February, when US and Israeli forces attacked. Iranian ships face their own blockade imposed by the US. BBC News. Bangladesh has rolled out a mass vaccination campaign to combat its deadliest measles outbreak in decades that's killed nearly 500 children in 2 months. UNICEF said more than 18 million children had been vaccinated. The UN agency said it had warned the previous interim government of the risks of not vaccinating children, but there was a delay in procuring the vaccines. The outgoing Speaker of Uganda's parliament has become the focus of an army crackdown on senior officials accused of corruption. The army chief says his father, President Yoweri Museveni, has given him powers to arrest anyone in Uganda. Richard Kagoe reports from Nairobi.
Security forces raided the homes and parliamentary offices of Uganda's former Speaker Anita Among in Kampala over the weekend, seizing luxury vehicles, including a Rolls-Royce and a Range Rover. Army Chief Muhoozi Kainerugaba says the seized assets could be auctioned to recover public funds. The operation appears to be part of a wider anti-corruption crackdown ordered by President Yoweri Museveni, who has ruled Uganda for nearly 4 decades. Ms. Among, once seen as part of Mr. Museveni's inner circle, has not been arrested.
The union representing Samsung electronics workers says a planned strike has been called off. An 18-day walkout due to begin on Thursday was averted after talks mediated by South Korea's Labour Minister. Samsung, the world's largest memory chip maker, has made huge profits on the back of the AI boom. Unions had asked for a greater share to go to employees. Workers will now vote on a tentative wage deal. The former Democratic US Congressman Barney Frank, who came out as one of the first openly gay representatives, has died at the age of 86. He's remembered as a trailblazer for LGBT rights, the first member of Congress to enter into a same-sex marriage. Frank also notably took on Wall Street, helping overhaul financial regulations after the 2008 financial crisis. BBC News.
You're listening to Outside Source, live from the BBC World Service. We're here at our small desk right in the heart of the BBC's main newsroom. Looking at the bank of screens in front of me, I can see President Trump delivering a speech, it looks like, to naval officers. I can see a live shot of the White House. I can see one of our correspondents getting ready to speak to our TV outlets. And we, in a few seconds, are going to be speaking to Will Grant, our correspondent in Havana, because we've seen on the Reuters news agency that a senior Trump administration official has said that the former Cuban president, Raul Castro, who came to power with his older brother, Fidel Castro, in 1959, and who's now 94, has been indicted in the United States. Will Grant in Havana, thank you so much for joining us. Take us through the story and what we know.
Well, this decision by the US Justice Department will relate to an incident in 1996, the shooting down of 2 civilian US airplanes. They were run by a Cuban-American organization called Brothers to the Rescue. That group carried out support by airdropping emergency supplies to Cuban migrants who were either stranded at sea or trying to make it into the United States, alerted the Coast Guard. The other thing that Brothers of the Rescue did, however, was fly over Havana and drop propaganda leaflets over the city, for which they were repeatedly warned by the Cuban government that they were violating Cuban airspace. Eventually this came to a head in 1996 when Cuban fighter jets shot 2 of them down, and that has been essentially a flashpoint in US-Cuban relations ever since. We don't have the exact details of what's in this indictment, exactly what the charges would be, but they would relate to that time when Raul Castro was the defense minister, the second in command in Cuba after his brother Fidel Castro, and is essentially a significant escalation in this decades-long conflict.
He's 94 then. You were here sitting at the desk just a few days ago, and I was asking you some of the same questions, but just do remind us, what does he do now that he's 94? Does he still play an influential role in Cuban life?
He does. He does, particularly when it comes to relations with the United States. He is the former president. He's no longer the head of the Cuban Communist Party, but he is, if you like, the power behind the throne. He is the co-founder of the Cuban Revolution, along with the late Fidel Castro. He's considered by so many Cubans to basically be untouchable that, I think there will be a pushback about the idea that he would be charged. I think even moderate Cubans in Cuba would take offense, would really question that decision. But yes, he remains crucial when it comes to this particular very delicate moment with Washington. It is his grandson, for example, who's one of the key figures doing the negotiation with the Trump administration and with Marco Rubio.
And On the point of Marco Rubio, he posted a video addressed to the people of Cuba a little earlier, and as you and I were speaking when you were here, Marco Rubio himself is the son of Cuban migrants from Cuba to the United States. He grew up speaking perfect Cuban accented Spanish. We're going to play our audience a sense of how he sounds in Spanish, and then I'll bring the translation in.
La razón por la que se ven obligados a sobrevivir 22 horas al día sin electricidad no se debe a un bloqueo.
And Marco Rubio tells people in Cuba the reason you're forced to survive 22 hours a day without electricity is not due to an oil blockade by the US. You've been suffering from blackouts for years. The real reason you don't have electricity, fuel, and food is because those who control your country have plundered billions of dollars and nothing has been used to help the people. And looking at US policy then in Latin America, on the 3rd of January, the US seized Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela, which is a prime ally and sponsor of Cuba. Is there discussion or worry or thought in Cuba that the US might do the same and use special forces to carry out an operation against Raúl Castro?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the Cuban government has already now responded to that video via its Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez. He dismissed Mr. Rubio's video as a playbook of lies. And I think you're right to bring in the reference to Venezuela. Obviously, there is sort of been a before and after when it comes to Cuba. The before relationship with Venezuela, where they could rely on their close ally Nicolás Maduro to supply huge amounts of crude oil over the years and basically keep the lights on on the island, and the after, where they're dealing with essentially Delcy Rodriguez in charge, who clearly seems to be aligned with Washington and what the Trump administration wants. There's been a near total oil blockade on the island, and things are becoming extremely difficult. And with regard to your question about whether or not people feel there could be a repeat, essentially, of what happened to Nicolás Maduro here in Cuba, I mean, it's definitely within the realms of possibility. That, I think, is what people now consider, that ultimately the unthinkable is very much thinkable in Latin America in 2026, and that they believe that anything is potentially possible.
Given you're now in Havana, Will, just paint us a picture of what it's like in the capital right now.
It remains an extremely bleak picture. I mean, every time I come in, I see that, you know, there are more chunks of the city that are in darkness as one drives in. You can see that people are essentially struggling to do the basics. They're not able to find public transport. They're having to cycle in the high temperatures and the extreme warm weather. They're suffering to get through the night with only a couple of hours a day of electricity, which means no air conditioning. It means food rotting in the fridges. All the things that we've been talking about over these past few months about rubbish building up on street corners because garbage trucks aren't coming around to collect it and so on. The picture remains that bleak. Cuba's famous resilience is being tested to its absolute breaking point, and we are seeing the occasional moments of protest.
Navigation resumed. Navigation resumed. Turn left. You have arrived. Navigation resumed. In 200 meters, turn right.
Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses with customizable coverage options to fit individual business needs. More at progressivecommercial.com.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, a Tulsa-based charitable foundation dedicated to providing equal opportunity for children through investments in early childhood education, community health, and civic enhancements. Information at gkff.org.
The listener-supported service of the University of Tulsa. Public Radio 89.5, KWGS HD1, Tulsa.
You're listening to Outside Source on the BBC World Service, live from the BBC's newsroom in central London. On the programme in a few minutes' time, we'll tell you more about why the victory of Arsenal in the English Premier League matters to so many people. It's not just about the goals or the passing or the scoring or the team lineups. It's about the way in which football as a sport, and Arsenal in this case, connects members of the same family.
BBC News with Moira Alderson. Marco Rubio has offered a new relationship with the Cuban people, with video message marking the anniversary of Cuba's independence. Speaking in Spanish, America's top diplomat blamed the island's hardships on its communist leadership, not the US fuel blockade. This comes as Cuba's revolutionary leader Raul Castro is about to be formally indicted by Washington. A video posted by Israel's far-right national security minister, in which he taunts detained international activists from the Gaza aid flotilla, has sparked a global outcry. Canada, the Netherlands and France have all summoned their respective Israeli ambassadors, while Turkey said the video showed the violent and barbaric mentality of the Israeli government. Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy says it's allowed 26 vessels to transit the Strait of Hormuz in the past 24 hours. It said oil tankers and other commercial vessels made the passage in coordination and with security provided by the Navy. Britain's Defence Ministry says a Royal Air Force plane was repeatedly intercepted by 2 Russian jets over the Black Sea last month, with one flying so close it triggered emergency systems on board, including disabling the autopilot. Bolivia has expelled Colombia's ambassador because of concerns about interference in its internal affairs during weeks of anti-government protests. Bolivia's foreign ministry emphasized that dismissal did not mean a break in diplomatic ties. Samsung workers have reached an agreement on a wage deal one day before a planned strike at the world's biggest supplier of memory chips. Their union said it would postpone the 18-day walkout until further notice. The former Democratic US Congressman Barney Frank, who came out as one of the first openly gay representatives, has died at the age of 86. He notably took on Wall Street, helping to overhaul financial regulations after the 2008 financial crisis. BBC News.
You're listening to Outside Source on the BBC World Service, live from our newsroom here in central London. We want to bring you up to date with Ebola cases in Central Africa. The World Health Organization has said this week that cases are likely to rise, and today it said that the outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, may have started a couple of months ago. The focus is now on curbing transmission and exploring potential treatment and vaccine options. Speaking to journalists in Geneva this morning, the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, gave this update.
The situation is a public health emergency of international concern, but is not a pandemic emergency. WHO assesses the risk of the epidemic as the high at the national and regional levels and low at the global level. Beyond the confirmed cases, there are almost 600 suspected cases and 179 suspected deaths. We expect those numbers to keep increasing, given the amount of time the virus was circulating before the outbreak was detected.
That was the head of the World Health Organization. We want to cross now to our correspondent Emily Magomedo in the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. Just explain, Kinshasa is on the western part of the country, around 1,500 kilometers from the area, the locus of the current outbreak on the other side of the country. Emery, from where you are, what are officials saying?
Well, all the samples
take the case of health teams. If they want to get closer to where people might be in trouble because of the outbreak, what do they do? Do they simply drive towards the area? Do they have enough supplies to get there? Are the roads okay?
They are close operation zones where the military is neutralizing wind fighting rebels. That the most important challenges. These roads are used by different people, miners are going to sell whatever they've found. Circulation is there, but it is insecure. That's the main issue. But these that part of the eastern DRC, the northeast, has quite a high, densely populated area, and people and mobility of people is quite high.
And is movement inside the country still allowed? Can people get from the east of the country to the west where you are?
Of course, we have 3 flights connecting Bunia, the capital city, with Turi. Almost we have direct flights, Bunia, Kinshasa, and they even on Sunday they have been a suspected case here in Kinshasa announced by the WHO and then denied by the police officials. And it was one man who was returning to Turi when he heard that the outbreak was declared. He went himself for screening, and unfortunately this came negative. But news went out, and even the WHO did say that he was tested positive. So it shows how close we are, even if it is 1,700 kilometers.
Yes. Emery Makomedu in the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. Thank you so much. This is Outside Source. Our global affairs reporter Anbarasan Etirajan has joined me at our desk in the newsroom to give us an update on the story we've been following here on the program. You might remember last week, 6 people drowned underwater cave diving in the Maldives. There were 5 tourists who initially drowned, and then a local rescue diver drowned as well. The efforts to recover the bodies have been incredibly complicated. Anbarasan, have they got all the bodies yet?
Yes, today the Maldivian officials were saying that they recovered 2 more bodies. The last of the 5 bodies were recovered, and then they were taken to Mali for further identification, and they say they will be repatriated to Italy soon. Now, the background to the story is 5 Italians. One of them was a marine biology professor from the University of Genoa. So they went on a boat that also included about 15 Italians. So they went for this exploration, and they went deep underwater, went into a cave, and that's where they got a difficulty, about 60 meters below the surface of the water. This is in Wabuato, south of the capital, Mali. And when they did not surface, then the other passengers on the boat, they alerted the Maldivian forces, and on the very same day, unfortunately, they found the body of the instructor and the captain of the vessel. It was near the mouth of the cave. And then subsequently on Saturday, one of the Maldivian rescue divers, he passed away because of decompression related issues, because when you go into such depth, your body pressure changes, and so there are so many complications that shocked the entire Maldivian nation. Now, I've been speaking to officials, I've been covering the story for news website and other outlets. See, one thing is the Maldivian officials are questioning, of course, even they were giving conflicting information. They say among these 5, only 3 had proper permission to go for diving in coral areas, but they did not mention any cave while they got the permission. So they are doing an investigation at the moment. So it is a very sad story, because the whole of Italy was in shock. The Italian media was covering extensively this issue, and how these kind of activities can be so dangerous, and you need to take a lot of precautions and preparations.
Do we know more about what credentials they would have had to show to go on this dive?
See, what I was speaking with one of the Maldivian officials, he was saying if anything is below 30 meters from the surface of the sea, that is called a technical diving, and you permission. Even then, the various reasons are being cited what would have happened. One theory was about whether if they had enough cylinders, even if they get into any difficulty, whether they have any backup oxygen cylinders. Two, when you go below certain depth, then the composition of the gas inside the cylinder, the oxygen and nitrogen, it has to be modified so that your body faces enormous pressure, so the intake of oxygen increases. So that is one reason. Or probably there was some sort of a current, or even if you kick the ground, it can trigger sand and it can blur the vision. People can get disorientated very quickly. But it is going into a cave. They found the bodies in the third chamber. All the four bodies were together. So that means somehow they got into difficulty in the deepest part of the cave. So it is also a lesson, but a lot of investigation. We still don't know exactly what happened, but it gripped the nation in Italy as well as in the Maldives, how the whole recovery operation was going on.
And Belasan Etidajan, thank you so much. Let's return to football now. Mike Williams, presenter of Sport Today here on the World Service, is here with me at the desk. It's time to talk about Arsenal in a moment in the programme, but let's go to the spying scandal, which has affected a club trying to join Arsenal in the Premier League.
That were in the Premier League, yes, a club that were in the Premier League, James, just last season, Southampton. We've heard from them for the first time since they were disqualified or thrown out of the Championship playoff final, which is due to take place this weekend at Wembley. It was around this time yesterday that we did hear that Southampton had been removed from this Blue Ribbon game, the so-called £20 million game, the richest games in club football, the winner of which is promoted to the Premier League. It was due to be Southampton against Hull City this Saturday, but yesterday, after the findings of an investigation by the English Football League, the EFL, were published, we learned that Southampton had admitted to not just one case of spying, espionage, covertly filming the training session of an opponent, not just once but 3 times in the season just gone. It's been a fascinating, remarkable story that's really shocked a lot of people in English football. Well, today Southampton had a chance to appeal their disqualification. That appeal hearing is ongoing as we speak, but we have heard, as we say, from the club and what they have told their appeal, calling their disqualification manifestly disproportionate to every previous sanction in the history of the English game. They say that because they've been denied the opportunity to compete in this game worth more than £200 million, they believe the financial consequence of the ruling make it, by considerable distance, they say, the largest penalty ever imposed on an English football club. They do admit liability. They do say they expect to be sanctioned, but they thought that might be rather as a financial fine rather than disqualification.
Let's move to trophies. The first major European trophy will be handed out tonight.
It will in Istanbul. This is the Europa League final, featuring another Premier League side, Aston Villa, who are looking to win their first major European trophy since 1982, taking on the Bundesliga side of Freiburg in Istanbul. You would say Villa starting off favourites in that one, not least because of their manager Unai Emery, the Spaniard in charge of Villa, has won this competition, the Europa League, 5 times already as a manager. He's been in 6 finals. This is his 7th appearance in the Europa League final, so he's looking to continue his good form in that competition. So Villa starting off in favourites. Of course, 3 major trophies handed out across Europe now. There's the Europa League this evening. This time next week it'll be the Europa Conference League, and then a week on Saturday it is the big one, the Champions League. Defending champions Paris Saint-Germain taking on a little team called, I think you've heard a little bit about them in today's programme, Arsenal.
Thank you so much, Mike, with the sport. It doesn't end for Arsenal. They are still, though, celebrating their Premier League title. So a little earlier we brought together some of the fans who have been celebrating and will continue to celebrate, perhaps up to and even past the time of the Champions League final that Mike has been discussing. So I was joined by James, a business student in London, who was at the Emirates Stadium last night, about 5 kilometres from this newsroom. From the North Bank podcast, we had Steph, a teacher who's also here in the UK. Content creator Maritza joined us from Indonesia. And in Poland, we had the head of the official Ukrainian Arsenal fan club, David, who began by telling us why he began to support Arsenal.
It
tell us about what you did.
Hi, yeah, it was absolutely incredible. So me and a few friends, we started off in a pub. We tried to get in one near the stadium, but they were all completely full, completely packed. So we had to go around to a few of them. We eventually did manage to get in one, and it went absolutely crazy when Bournemouth scored, and then obviously it got nerved at the end, but then the full-time whistle went. And it was just amazing scenes, and the roads were absolutely packed. They literally had to come to a stop. Everyone was honking their horns in celebration. That's people standing on their own cars, waving flags. It was absolutely incredible. And then we made our way over to the stadium, and I was thinking there would just be a few people out there. You know, I thought people would really save it for the parade, but I think there was like tens of thousands of people there. It was absolutely crazy. It was packed. It was an incredible night.
Let's cross to Indonesia. Maritza there. You presumably followed so many seasons when Arsenal came second or worse than second, where the team wasn't even in contention. Did you really believe it last night when you saw the words Arsenal are champions?
Yeah, actually last night and until now it felt so surreal for me. I mean, you know exactly that have been following how hard is Arsenal trying to get into, to the Euro, and as well as, as for right now, we currently try to prove ourselves to be, the first in England. I personally think that tonight the team would definitely deserve the title, because how hard that we had been through, and as well as, as a fan that we're leaving thousands of kilometers away from the Arsenal, supporting the team that wasn't exactly in our country, felt so heartfelt that they actually got their recognition, from the world.
I want to bring back in Steph. Steph, it is a provocative thought. To be a football fan is to suffer. That's part of the point. That the team loses, that the fan suffers, but that is teaches a lesson of life. When you win, what happens to all the suffering then?
Then turn right.
It absolutely just evaporates, but I would sort of counter that as well. Okay. Yes, suffering is part of it, but I know, I'm absolutely in a privileged position to go to lots of the games. I've seen home and away games, gone abroad to watch Arsenal as well, all over Europe, and you are chasing those highs a little bit, but those highs are magnified by the lows.
Yes.
And Arsenal in the last 10 years has been really up and down, and I'm sure there'll be other fans who say, well, Albion's never been anywhere sort of near that, but there has been some testing times and lots of division in the fan base, and for someone like myself who wants football to be something that brings people together, it's hard to go through those times when there's such division. But I must admit, it was against Burnley on Monday night when Arteta was giving a speech about just a couple of games and we can do it. I've never felt so united as a club, and therefore next day when it finally does happen, because Bournemouth got those points off Man City, it just lifted huge weights and just was a massive release of happiness. It was great.
David, as your country has undergone a war over 4 years, how important has it been for you to have football, and in particular Arsenal, as something to keep with you during tough times?
Yeah, I mean, football is really big part of my life, both watching and supporting Arsenal, also playing our Sunday league games, and that's really what helped me go through everything, going to another country, being disconnected with my friends and fellow supporters and everything. And I'm really happy and proud that I had the possibility to put my effort into creating official Arsenal supporters club and uniting all Ukrainian supporters. And I really wanted to thank everybody who was involved in that, either from the club side and both from the local supporters. So yeah, I think our community is amazing, and what we do during the war is really helping everybody to stay united and stay strong.
And James, here in London, you're a business student. When I was watching football many years ago, the players largely came from the British Isles and from Ireland. But Arsenal, like so many Premier League clubs, gets its football players from across the world, gets its manager from Spain. How important is that international element to Arsenal, but also to the appeal of the Premier League?
I think it's really important because, when you got players from all over the world, it helps to massively expand the brand and expand the fan base. And a club like Arsenal now that's got such a huge global fan base, I think a lot of that does come from having so many international connections. That if you look at someone like Arsene Wenger during the Invincibles, obviously he himself was French, he brought in lots of French players, Vieira, Henry, Petit, and that really helped to grow the fan base over in France. And I think obviously now we've got a team full of internationals from everywhere. And I think having that global connection within the club can really help to create that kind of family environment, and I think that's really helped to push us on this season.
You mentioned the Invincibles, the team of 2003 and 4, which went through the whole Premiership season without suffering a defeat. Question I'm going to throw out, please anyone answer. What nickname would you give this year's team?
Incredibles? I don't know.
Incredibles?
Like, something like that. That's something we will definitely remember.
It's redemption for me. If I don't get into the UCL final and also before we after 23 years in the same year that we're in the final of UCL, I think it's redemption here.
And having seen some Arsenal fans in this newsroom looking noticeably happy, and as I've gone up and down the lift in the day, I've seen some people wearing Arsenal jerseys inside the newsroom. Do any of you feel physically lighter today than you did yesterday, or that you might have done at any point for many years? And do jump in.
Sorry, Steph here, just going to jump in, because I work in a school, and I work in quite a big school. There's about 2,000 students and staff here, and I've come in today, I'm wearing an Arsenal branded tie, I've got my scarf on, I've had an Arsenal jacket on, because I just want to show off basically that we've done it, and we've waited a huge long time. There's another teacher here, he's got his top on. There's a history teacher I work with, he was like 7 when we won the league last time, so he doesn't really remember it, and he literally sought me out. I saw him like running towards me, and it's just been great. I feel like we've been walking on air, because we've wanted it so much, and we love the team, and there's a huge connection, and it's just, it has had a real physical effect. I've smiled more than I've probably smiled in days and weeks.
Final quickfire round to each of you. I'm going to do this very briefly in the last few seconds. Favourite player and prediction for the Champions League final? James.
Favourite player is Eze. I think he's really transformed the way that we play this season. That's really helped us. Prediction for the Champions League final, I've got to be positive and say 2-0 win.
And Maritza?
I think for me it's Declan Rice. He's a really general player of the versatile that we expect from Arsenal, and my prediction is going to be 2-0 to the Arsenal.
I see. David?
Yeah, I'd say it's Saliba and Gabriel, because I play as CB as well in our Sunday league, so I really looked them up. I think we're gonna win 1-0, and we will score from the corner.
We will see. Our thanks to David, to Maritza, to Steph and to James. Well, if you live in East Africa, you might well have heard the song we're about to play in recent weeks on the radio, or seen it on social media as everyone tries to do the dance challenge. It's the hit song Finale by Bien-Aimé Baraza, better known as Bien, who's joined forces with Tanzanian and bongo flavor legend Ali Kiba. The video is nearly 30 million views as we speak, and it opens with a group of them watching a match. His beloved Arsenal are playing. Since the song was released, East African Arsenal fans has latched onto the song as something of an anthem, pushing the team towards the title. Before that happened, Jan spoke to the BBC about his song.
It's a song that I actually made to speak about this event. It's a song that called me the champion. And people have been doing this song. And the symbolism of Arsenal fans in the video. And if you watch the video, you will see a bunch of friends who are always celebrating what is about to become the biggest win in 20 years. And I put out the song, I think, 6 weeks ago, something like that. I also had a lot of the moments when I stumbled, shot myself. I'm just happy that For some people, it's another team, it's another sport. But I think a lot of men derive happiness from the simple things in life. And music and football are things that really connect and unite people. We unite people in the dance floors, we unite people in living rooms, we unite people in clubs, in social settings, and how music is used in African settings as well is
navigation resumed.
So football and music go hand in hand.
On the BBC World Service, and do stay with the World Service, particularly over the next few minutes, as officials in Washington are expected to announce publicly formal charges against the former Cuban president Raul Castro at an event. It's believed to relate to an attack in 1996 in which Cuban jets shot down 2 civilian planes operated by exiles from the country. At the time, Raul Castro was armed forces minister. He is now retired, but is clearly in the sights of officials in Washington. That's just about it from this edition of Outside Source. I'm James Reynolds. Thank you so much for your company.
Headphones and tune out the people on your morning commute? University of Chicago Business School professor Nick Epley says we should all be a little more social instead.
People actually enjoy when they talk to a person sitting next to them in a solitude condition, when they keep to themselves.
That's next time, Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon at 1 on Public Radio 89.5.
Support for Public Radio Tulsa is provided by 9 Funeral and Cremation, providing sensible, respectful cremation and memorial service options for over 85 years. 9 Funeral and Cremation, 918-742-5556 or NIND.com.
89.5 ATS HD1 Tulsa.
nonpartisan public forum where we present a wide range of thought leaders on the important issues of the day. Some of the most difficult issues for people to discuss civilly include abortion, views of our current president, transgender politics, crime and drugs, and of course, the Middle East. This last one was made even more difficult for people to discuss in respectful exchanges following the October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas, which killed more than 1,100 people, and an Israeli response that flattened the Gaza Strip and killed tens of thousands of people. How did an already fraught situation come to this? How did we go from the hopes raised by the Oslo peace process to the despair of today? Is there a way out of the escalating violence? To learn more, we turn to Robert Mennel, Senior Fellow and Lecturer at Yale University's Jackson School, and the co-author of Tomorrow is Yesterday, Life, Death, and the Pursuit of Peace in Israel and Palestine. He advised 3 U.S. presidents, has a working knowledge of Palestinian leaders Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, and participated in secret talks over decades. He is in conversation at Commonwealth Club World Affairs in San Francisco with Mark Danner, a journalist and professor at the University of California, Berkeley Journalism School. Let's listen in.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. Thank you for coming out. I'm Mark Danner. I'm a writer and journalist, and I teach journalism in English at UC Berkeley. And relatively, I've done a fair amount of coverage of the Middle East. Tonight, I'll be talking with former U.S. diplomat Robert Malley about his new book. Robert Malley has served in senior Middle East positions in the administrations of Presidents Clinton, Obama, and Biden. And I should say he was special envoy for Iran under Biden. Relevant for a discussion today. He was president and CEO of the International Crisis Group, and he is currently a senior fellow and lecturer at Yale University's Jackson School. His new book is co-authored with Hussein Agha, who's his longtime collaborator, notably in many pieces for the New York Review of Books. The full title of the new book is Tomorrow is Yesterday: Life, Death, and the Pursuit of Peace in Israel, Palestine. So I would like to take advantage of the fact that you've had immense experience in dealing with Iran and the Iranians to start off with what's going on currently in the war, and then perhaps follow that string back to what we call the Middle East problem, which is Israel and Palestine. I find as we get closer to the ceasefire ending, things seem to get more and more confusing. I wonder if you could kind of lay out the situation as you see it at this point in the conflict.
First, thanks for all of you. Thanks to the Commonwealth Club. It's great to be here. It's very hard to summarize where we are today. We have sort of an impresario who, if he knows what he's doing, he's not really letting us in on the secret, because it seems like every day is a new objective, is a new plan, is a new whim, a new impulse, and Amadis is talking about our president. But I do think a few things should be clear. Number one, this war never should have started. It was unlawful. It's unlawful for domestic reasons, but many presidents, unfortunately, including some that I've served, have ignored the letter of the law and declared war without referring to Congress. It's unlawful internationally. There's absolutely no basis for the war. It was unjustified. It was unnecessary. None of the arguments that have been made for this war hold any water. For me, very few things in life are incontrovertible. That's one thing. It's a war that is not just unjustified, unnecessary, illegal. It's one that is having huge consequences. People here could complain about the price of gas and the stock market. We'll get over that. Consequences for the Iranian people, not so much. I mean, they already had to suffer from a leadership that has had their interests at the very bottom of their list of priorities. But now a war that is, just quoting the president, it's going after bridges and infrastructure and the petrochemical industry and their steel factories. They're going to have to live with this for generations. And finally, the rest of the world, these middle and lower income countries that are going to pay, and nobody here is going to see it, but it's going to really have repercussions for them for generations to come. So it is really a catastrophic war. And so where we are today is, it's very hard to know what the president wants. I would say that if what he's looking for is a deal that's going to make sure that Iran cannot acquire a nuclear weapon, that can be achieved. I would argue that it was achieved in 2015. I was part of the team that with the leadership of President Obama negotiated the deal that took care of the nuclear problem for at least a period of 12 to 15 years. We're much worse off as a result of the president's tearing up the deal and then going to war, but I do think that if his goal was to reach a deal that would address that problem, it was doable. If his goal is to reach a deal that's going to open the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, was not closed before the war was launched, I think he could reach that too. But we just don't know what he's looking for. And so the reason it's so hard to answer the question is that imagine any one of you sitting on the other side of the table with Vice President Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner. Number one, you're not sure what you're negotiating about because it seems to change every day. It's just about the nuclear, or the missiles, or the drones. Is it Iran's support for its regional allies? You don't know whether the people at the other end of the table know what the president wants, because twice before, during negotiations, President Trump decided to bomb Iran. And they don't know whether he knows what he thinks, because the president himself seems to change his mind almost on an hourly basis. So, objectively, I think both sides have an acute interest in ending this war. I actually don't think President Trump wants to go on. It's not helping him politically. It's cost him economically. He cares about the stock market's going to suffer. So I think he wants an exit. I think the Iranians want an exit, not by sacrificing core interests, but they want an exit because of the economic cost. They need relief from the destruction. They need sanctions relief. So objectively, one would say there is a zone of potential agreement, but it's very hard to get there. You have the mistrust that existed before President Trump, and that's been compounded to the nth degree because of everything the president has done to convince the other side that he's unreliable.
It seems an irony of the present situation that the previous agreement, which, as you point out, accomplished a major one of his goals, could be the enemy of achieving an achieve something that people will say is dramatically better than what Obama achieved. You saw that over the weekend with this mentioning they want a 20-year period when they won't enrich. And of course, in the agreement, it was 15 years.
I'm going to interrupt you here because I want to give credit where credit is due. If the president achieves even 5 years, no enrichment. That's more than the Iran deal in 2015. Iran had not agreed to suspend. Iran can always enrich, but just at low levels. So I'd be the first, and I've said this publicly, if the president can achieve that, I would say that part of the deal with these is stronger than the one that Obama negotiated. Would that justify the war, the destruction, what it's done to Iranians, what it's done to people around the world? Absolutely not. But I do think if what he's looking for is a deal where people can stand up and say, oh, it's better than JCPOA, I'll do it if that's what it takes to do it.
It is remarkable when you look at what's been published that the decision to start this war seems to have been as lackadaisical and casual as it seems. That is, that Netanyahu simply gave a presentation. The U.S. intelligence community said that half of what he said was, as Marco Rubio summarized, bullshit. But the president still decided to go along, and no one was willing to question him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the president. I don't have a degree in psychology, so I don't want to claim that I could understand what went through his mind. But I think reading all the reports, there's a narrative that makes, to me, sense. Here's a person who was emboldened by what he sees as a series of dramatic successes against the prediction of many experts. And you can go back to his first term when he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, when he killed Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Quds Force. Later in the second term, when he bombed the Iran nuclear facilities, when he kidnapped President Maduro of Venezuela. All these instances, I know because I know the people who made the claim, and I know some people in the intelligence community were warning the president, these could turn out to be very dangerous. If you're somebody who tends to be already skeptical about experts and who thinks that your judgment is superior to theirs, and you have these series of events where, you know what, it turned out better than the expert predicted, you feel emboldened. You feel a bit drunk with success about, I can do no wrong. And I'm a president now to second term. His eyes are not on re-election, his eyes are on history, and he thinks, I'll be the president who will have solved problems that have plagued America for decades and who will change the orientation of 3 regimes from the anti-American to the pro-American. Ken did it with Venezuela yesterday. He believes he'll do it with Iran today. He's convinced he'll do it with Iran tomorrow. So I think that was where he was. This is my chance to get this done. The regime is weakened. adrift, leaderless, the second Nakba, if you will. Israel, which had felt threatened in its existence and responds with overwhelming force, but doesn't really know what to do with its victory. If you go back, even the words that were used in the wake of all this, I said Nakba, genocide, Holocaust, pogrom, all the words are coming back to us.
Keep left, then turn left.
Partly what we tried to say with the title is what's happening now is not new. It's evidence that things have simply not changed that much. And the sub-theme is the 30 years or so of the Oslo process in which both Hussein and I participated in different ways. I was part of the Clinton and Obama team working on Israel-Palestine. Hussein was unofficial advisor to the Palestinians for much longer than I was working on the American side. So that period in which we had both participated, it vanished into thin air, as if it meant nothing, right? I mean, what about all the peace process working for a two-state solution? We're back to the most essential, visceral conflict between two national movements. And that is yesterday. And then there's a chapter in the book where we go through a lot of the other themes and some of the trends you're seeing on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side and the Arab side. They really are reminders of things that speak to us from a past that is just not that far away.
I think if you follow this issue closely, you want to lean forward and say, well, wait a minute. We were so close. You were so close. There were these moments at Camp David, after Camp David, later with Secretary Kerry, all of these moments in which this whole conflict was reduced to a handful of issues. And the matter separating the parties on this handful of issues was very, very small. So was that all an illusion? Or are you simply saying that that was the moment to get there?
state of Israel. So neither side really believed in what they were told to believe in and which they told us they believed in order to please the U.S. and others. So I really would dispute the notion that they were ever that close, but I also would say, what were they close to? And they were not really close to the solution that we believed fortunate. I think the notion that there's going to be a solution.
Take the exit on the right.
You know, that's what we were close to achieving. That is really, again, misdiagnosing what this was about. And part of what stood in the way of that outcome is that
Navigation resumed.
you got to give up your dream, protect the Palestinians. Once you have this outcome, that's it. You're not going to raise a question of the refugees. You're not going to raise a question of the rest of the territory. You're not going to raise a question of justice. You have to be satisfied with this, and you're telling the Israelis the same thing. That same model that the Zionists may have. This is the limit of it. And we speak of an anecdote where one of my former colleagues traveled to Northern Ireland with some Israeli rabbis who never left Israel. And they go to Northern Ireland, and when they leave, they say, maybe there's a way to coexist with Palestinians. That falls short of absolute peace, resolution of our conflict, end of conflict, end of claim. That was the moniker that we had used. You know, both sides, Catholics and Protestants, still retain their dreams. Nobody told them that if they agreed to this, they would give up their dreams. Maybe the way for Israelis and Palestinians to coexist is to retain their dreams, find modes of coexistence that doesn't ask either one to give up what they hold dearest. We don't offer a solution in the book, but that's one of the pathways which is maybe you've got to give up this notion of two ethno-national states, because it doesn't answer so many of the questions that have animated their struggle for so long. And I'll end with this. You know, if you ask many religious Israelis, Hebron matters much more to them. And if you ask many Palestinians, they would say, you know, our struggle began and was born from the plight of the refugees. That's the Palestinian national movement began in the beginning of 1947, and all of the Palestinian leadership were Palestinian refugees for whom the struggle was about return.
Yeah, it occurs to me as you're talking, I think you point this out in the book, that many of those who threw themselves over the barrier on October 7th and did the killing, their families' original villages were right there. You know, they're all living within a few miles of the areas from which they were mostly expelled in 48. You're very eloquent in the book about people's hopes and dreams and the things that animate them and gives them dignity. How do you get around the fact that if you're talking about the Palestinians' hopes and dreams of returning, of finding dignity, for example, through returning to those villages, how do you offer a solution short of returning to those villages?
The problem is you need to recognize that the amorphous, intangible matters and respect it. And the best summary I had after Camp David, the American team, you know, pretty despondent, got together and wondered what went wrong. And one of the smartest members of the team was the lawyer Jonathan Schwartz. He said at the end of it, you know what our problem was? We didn't respect the issues enough. And that really stayed with me for the last 25 years. What he meant was we saw them as cards that you would trade. I mean, really, I mean, if you want the epitome of what not to do and how not to speak, it is President Trump. I mean, he really is a reflection of a vision of the world in which it's just cards, right? You don't have cards, you have cards. I have cards, you don't have them. I could beat you into submission. So that's the exaggerated, inflated, completely deformed way of thinking. But it is part of that. And what Jonathan Schwartz was telling us was, you got to respect the issues and hear how the parties themselves speak about them. And not think that, yeah, okay, they say they want the right come about. It was not an indigenous feeling of either side. It came from abroad, but also you had courageous Israelis and Palestinians against the wishes often of their leaders who got together and explored creative ideas. And what we say is that has to come back again. You need to have Israelis and Palestinians, because it's their conflict after all, who are going to explore together means of coexistence. I think the U.S. role in that should be to say, at a minimum, whatever dispensation occurs, we could be indifferent about it's 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, whatever, but every person living between the river and the sea has to be afforded the same level of safety, security, dignity, rights, political, civic, economic. And that's our metric. That's our test. And try to assist them, but that's what they need to find.
This is the Commonwealth Club of California radio program. Today we're presenting a discussion of failed Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts. Our guest is Robert Malley, in conversation with Mark Danner. Thanks for joining us for this program, the latest episode of the longest-running radio show in the United States. Please stay in touch with Commonwealth Club World Affairs, our events, the travel program, and more by subscribing to our email newsletter at commonwealthclub.org/email and follow us on social media. Now, back to our program.
I was amazed during the Gaza war that the Biden administration, they were still pursuing the so-called Saudi option. Bringing that about, however fanciful it was, the two-state solution was critical, right? Because the Israeli government had to, Netanyahu had to say out of his mouth that he was dedicated to the two-state solution. So there's a sense in which, of all the people who don't want to part with the two-state solution, including the PA, the American government is one of them, isn't it?
Well, first of all, it makes sense that people don't want to part with the two-state solution because they have nothing else. I've had this discussion with Biden officials early on, and they would say, well, even if we don't think the two-state solution is most likely, if we say that, it could open to all kinds of crazy ideas, and it's the only internationally accepted common frame of reference. How many times have I heard, I was there because I was an official, people saying, well, we're working toward a two-state solution, therefore nothing should be done to interfere with that process. Palestinians shouldn't engage in nonviolent resistance, they shouldn't go to the UN, they shouldn't go to International Court of Justice or the ICC, because all of that is going to interfere with what we're trying to do. Third parties shouldn't get involved because this is an American-led process that is moving towards a two-state solution. And meanwhile, beneath it, everything is moving in the opposite direction. The frame of mind of the two sides, their psychology, the facts on the ground, settler, the entrenched settlement thing that you've covered. The notion now is when people say, well, we need to keep the two-state solution idea alive, but go to Hebron, go to the rest of the West Bank, it is one state. And underneath this claim that we're working towards a two-state solution, you're justifying not doing anything to change what is genuinely a one-state reality in which one side reigns supreme over the other. So it has served as an excuse to justify not doing what we need to do to, at a minimum, lead to the kind of coexistence in which people would live with equal rights. So, I'm not against the two-state solution. If somebody tomorrow could show me how, under conditions today that are infinitely worse than they were in 93, 94, 95, even 2000, they have a roadmap, how we're really going to get from where we are today to a division of the land, ways that both sides would feel like their rights have been respected under two ethno-national states. It's better than where we are today, so it may not be what my moral and ethical preferences would like, but I'd be okay with that. But I don't know anyone, including the Biden administration, went towards they were very skeptical about a two-state solution, but just after October 7th, they felt they needed to refer to it because otherwise what did they have? But they had no roadmap for getting there. It was fantasy land. But that fantasy is not just fantasy, it's dangerous fantasy because, again, it excludes other ways of thinking. It excludes forms of action that may, in fact, change a status quo that is not just deeply entrenched, but getting worse and worse every day. So that's how U.S. officials in particular, President Company included, tend to repeat the same thing even when it doesn't work, then you claim it succeeded even though it's failed, and you claim that it's going to succeed in the future even though it's failed in the past. And there's example after example of how that's done in the two-state solution in one of those cases. President Biden in 2022, I think, is when he meets with the Palestinian president, says the conditions are not ripe for a two-state solution. After October 7th, when, if anything, the ripeness has gone in the other direction, all of a sudden they start talking about a two-state solution. If you need an example of how it's used, instrumentalized for purposes that have nothing to do with its achievement, that was it. There are many.
It really is going to be seen in history as a kind of brilliant gimmick, it seems to me, however harmful it was.
Absolutely.
Because it convinces one that the status quo is not the status quo.
Yeah.
But in fact, if you go there, spend much time on the West Bank, wherever, this is one state. You know, it's a very bizarre one state with different systems of justice and different systems of land and everything else, but it's one state.
So you know, there's always this notion that we are in a temporary position, and at one point the people say, okay, it's no longer temporary. It's not as if you have Israel here and the occupied territories there. It's one reality. Again, you got to figure out how you're going to deal with it. But so often you hear people say, well, we're not yet at the point where we have to reach that conclusion because it's an occupation which at some point will end.
I mean, the irony is, I remember years ago, Baron Ben-Vedisti said to me, you know, people always say that you can't have a democracy and a Jewish state. At a certain point, the numbers are going to be such that it's impossible. There'll be a majority Arab. And he said, it'll be like Lebanon. They'll just stop counting. And in fact, they stopped counting. I mean, arguably now there is a majority. And it's always been interesting to me that Israel is cited as the one democracy in the Middle East. The fact that half the population, in effect, is being ruled, not that doesn't have representative institutions.
But that only works as long as you believe the occupation is a temporary thing.
Exactly. So temporariness is critical.
Yeah.
But you mention in the book federalism, confederalism, the idea of two states with the same territory, which I found fascinating. But it seems that for any of those things to eventually happen, there has to be a focus that returns to what you said a few minutes ago. That is that everyone within the state has to have equal civil and political rights. And until that becomes a kind of focus, not only of international policy, but of Palestinian-Israeli policy, it seems to me it's unlikely. I mean, we're evolving in the